What's going on, folks? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to One Cast Fishing. I'm pulled up on the bank here in Jordan Lake. I'm going to do some fishing here in a few minutes. But today's video is about my top 5 lures in the summertime. 90% of my bass in the summertime probably come on one of these top 5 lures. And really 80% probably come on 3 of them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Talk about what I always have rigged up, my mainstays, my go-tos. Pretty much no matter where I go in the country, at least around here in the southeast, I have these tied up. With that said, let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree. Why don't you rank your top 5? Let me know what you use. And with that said, this is the first video in the series because through the course of the summer, I'm actually going to produce more content for you guys where I break down each and one of these baits more specifically. We get into a lot more details on it and hopefully some more knowledge that you guys can go out and apply when you're fishing in the summertime. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Number 1. The first one here, probably pretty obvious if you follow us at One Cast Fishing. I mean, we make jigs, and it is the football head jig. Pretty much all my big bass come on the football head jig. In fact, last year, all my 6-pounders plus, and with the exception of one that came on a shaky head, they all came on the jig. Multiple 6s, several 7s, my PB 815, they all came on the football head jig. And the reason is these bass get offshore in the summertime. Through hundreds and thousands of years, right, those high spots, those points, those humps, those ledges, they're much harder. That's why they didn't erode away with water and rain before the lakes were there, or with current. This fish get on those hard spots. There's gravel, there's rock, there's stumps down there. And because this football head here, if there's no sharp angles on that, you can drag this through those rocks really well. It obviously looks like a crawfish down here. This is one of ours. This is the Jordan Lake Special. This is a 3/4 ounce football head Carolina night crawl. Dragging this thing around very slowly in the summertime produces a lot of bites for me. Number 2. Let's move on to the next one here. The second one, and again, these are in no particular order, or at least I should say that. I may opt for one or the other depending on the conditions. A lot of times I opt for this first though, and that is a deep diving crankbait. This is a 5XD here by Strike King. I like going with the crankbait first to figure out if the bass are in an active mood, if they're actively feeding and chasing bait fish. It's very good on windy days, overcast days, and I'll pick up a 6XD here. Right, this long bill, and it's pretty wide too. The great thing about it, it gets down the depth and it will deflect off that cover down there. So a rock, a stump, when this comes across, deflects across a rock, it'll move erratically, and that's usually when you get your strikes. Now, we'll go into more detail in the crankbait video about how you can cause that erratic action through the movement and manipulation of your rod. But the deep diving crankbait is essential summertime bass tactic. Typically what I like to do is make sure that crankbait is running 2 to 3 feet deeper than the actual bottom of the water I'm fishing. So if I'm fishing 12 foot, again, this 5XD that runs to 15 foot, you know, it works really well. If I'm fishing 14 to 16 foot or even 17 foot, a lot of times these 6XDs work really well. A lot of other brands out there, I have other ones. I use the Strike King a lot because, well, where I fish it, I lose a lot of crankbaits, and these are relatively decently priced, but deep diving crankbait, excellent choice here in the summertime. Number 3. The third bait I always have on the summertime is a shaky head, and that's what I have right here. Now, I'm gonna pull this worm off because it's all dilapidated. I actually came out here yesterday and started filming the shaky head one. Had a great video on the shaky head, caught a lot of fish on it while I was talking about the baits. And well, none of my audio filmed for that, so that hopefully I can go out today and maybe film one of these. I lost that. But the shaky head is really good, and I prefer the stand-up version. They make some where the hooks are on the side here, so it will drag across and your worm will be back here. But I prefer the stand-up because as you're dragging it through the rocks and cover on the bottom, right, this head here is down in the rocks, and if you have a floating worm like I use, it floats up, and that's what attracts the bass. It's great for pressured situations. Later in the summer when the bass have seen a lot of crankbaits, a lot of jigs, etc. Bluebird skies, right? Slick calm conditions. When the bass, when they're tough to bite, I go for the shaky head. You can fish it extremely slow and it just picks up fish. And typically I'll adjust my weights depending on the depth I'm doing. This is actually a 1/4 ounce based upon the wind conditions and the depth out here. Again, we'll get more details in the shaky head video. But you know, they pick up a lot of fish, and one of those 6-pounders I caught last year came on the shaky head. Excellent choice out here for summertime fishing. Number 4. Now the fourth one I always have tied up, and if you saw my video at Sharon Harris earlier in the summer, you know why. Absolutely slayed them out there when they were schooled up. And that is a Flutter Spoon. A flutter spoon was kind of a secret technique to about a decade, 15 years ago. The pros knew how to use it, but it didn't really catch on mainstream. And for some reason, a lot of people don't use it in the summertime. More people use it in a wintertime scenario. And that, the one I just showed you, I'll show you guys again. That's a Shaky Spoon by Strike King. This is a much larger spoon here. This is actually a Bass Pro Band. But the great thing about it, right, they have these concave edges in here. So when this thing floats down through the water, it shimmies back and forth in a wide wobble. And what it looks like is a dying bait fish. And the bass just can't resist it. Now the bass need to be set up in a particular scenario to really make this effective. They can't be right on the bottom. Because if it's right on the bottom, you can use a crankbait, you can use a jig, you can use a shaky head. That video at Sharon Harris, what happened is, if this was my ledge here, or my point, and it dropped off to, this was in 12 to 14 foot of water, maybe 15, 18 foot, depending on where I was at, it dropped to 20 to 40 foot, depending on how deep that channel was. These bass weren't right on the bottom. So I couldn't get a crankbait shaky head jig bite. They were suspended 3 to 5 feet up here. The bass wouldn't come down and eat it. The flutter spoon, because you cast it out, you jerk it up and down, with that, it flies up off the bottom 5 to 7 feet and flutters back down. The bass just couldn't resist it. It's a great way to catch them when the bass are set up in the summertime. A couple other options you could use: hair jig, jerk bait, depending on how deep they are, like a Vision 110+1. I was able to do that too. But a flutter spoon, it's a really fun way to catch them. You can load the boat with them, and it's a great way when they're schooled up in that particular circumstance in the summertime. Number 5. Let's talk about the last one I always have rigged up in the summertime, and it might surprise you. It is the Little Ned rig. Now, this is one of ours that we make, and it has an offset hook there. And the beauty of that is, as you can see, you can basically Texas rig or rig your plastic on here weedless. Now, I came out Friday with a neighbor of mine, didn't really film. We were getting short strikes on the shaky head on those ledges. So I was like, let me pick up my Ned rig. And even in 14, 15 foot of water, this 5/32 ounce Ned rig here, I could feel the bottom, and I picked up a few bass that way. Now, the second way I like to fish in the summertime is because this is weedless here, I can work it in the brush piles very effectively. A lot of guys use a big Texas rig, big shaky head in brush piles. I downsize a lot. And for whatever reason, you can slowly work this through the limbs of the brush pile and catch a lot of bass that way. Caught a 4-pounder that evening doing that, which is absolutely outstanding. So, this weedless Ned head, it's always rigged up for me in the summertime, and it definitely produces for ultra finesse situations or in brush piles. All right, so that's my top 5 right there. What was it? A jig, a shaky head, a crankbait, a spoon, and the weedless Ned. No particular order, it just depends on the day. I mentioned a few others: a hair jig, jerkbait, drop shot also works really well. Drop shot, clear water fisheries, smallmouth fisheries, it really shines. I used to fish it a lot down here in North Carolina, but I seem to catch smaller fish when I use a drop shot. But when I really need a bite, I'll dig it out and cast it around. Big Texas rigs, right? I didn't even touch top waters, wobble heads. There's a lot of other techniques you can use. So let me know down below, what do you like to use in the summertime? And with that said, again, I'm going to be breaking down all these techniques in more in-depth videos. Maybe they're still in the shaky head bite. I mentioned yesterday that they definitely were. I had that filmed, but maybe they're on it today, so I go ahead and film and knock that out for you guys. But hopefully you guys can learn something from these videos, at least how I apply it and go out there and do better in the summertime, catch more bass. So again, I appreciate you guys watching, and stay tuned. And remember, a lunker is just one cast away. Go cast.